Today we're taking a look at Egon Schiele, a prominent Austrian painter during the early 20th century. He was most known for his many drawings and paintings of distorted figures and provocative nude portraits, twisted by his unconventional sense of beauty. He was described as a very skilled draftsman, which basically means he made incredible technical drawings, and he made a lot of drawings over the course of his short career. One source even said that he made over 3,000 drawings in total. The way he depicted human bodies was considered very radical for its time, actually. He didn't seem to care about like the norms around beauty and especially decency. He challenged these ideas of decency with his bold and unapologetic nudes. He was so much more interested in capturing what was inside the model rather than just their outward appearance. This is actually called self-portrait and was made in 1910. He created a multitude of self-portraits, and many of them depict him in very revealing poses. This is significant for the fact that men weren't normally shown this way before in Western art. He was among the first to distort the male figure and not just depict it with the intention of making it realistically proportional. This was done in sculpture before, but not really in painting. Schiele was considered one of the leading artists of the Austrian Expressionist movement, and the characteristics associated with that style is really most visible in his line work. He uses his very intense line work to express his internal emotions through his external body.
So yeah, Egon's work was very emotionally charged in that regard. He wasn't just drawing figures, but he was also drawing their personality. Um, None of his portraits were idealized. Compared to his contemporaries, they could even be considered ugly. But that's just because he really depicted the rawness of the human body. He really challenged the conventions of decency, especially in public. Um, his portraits, while being very erotically charged, were distorted and contorted versions of the human body. In his self portraits, he made himself even look pale and somewhat sickly. Um, but even in his self portraits, he had that consistent theme of provocativeness. His forms were very free flowing. And something interesting is that in almost every single portrait that he drew of a figure that's facing the viewer, it's also making eye contact with the viewer. And so he was known to make eye contact with his figure as he was drawing them. So it really makes you wonder if there was something going on when he was drawing them, something maybe intimate, or perhaps trying to imply some sort of judgment towards the viewer. In my opinion, I think he puts a little bit of himself in every one of his pieces. A common theme of his work is he really exaggerated hands. He loved to play with the human hand, the form of fingers. He made fingers very long, and he always articulated them in really irregular gestures. You can really see this in his portraits of Mein van Osen from 1910, which is probably one of his more extreme examples of his work. But also in this portrait, you can see the other quirks of his art style, which is his very organic line work. All of his paintings and pieces, all his drawings were mostly made with lines. And when he did render things, he didn't put that much detail. He used oil paint to use brush strokes and imply form with paint strokes. But he really didn't render things. Most of his things were more like sketches. But despite that, he was able to make things really lifelike and organic looking. He had really immaculate sense of gesture, and even the colors he used were somewhat exaggerated, but they were based on the human body. The human skin has all colors of the rainbow in it, but very subtle. But he exaggerated those, which really brought them out. So, despite these really simple colors and minimal rendering, he was able to make his drawings so lifelike, even with the exaggerations of form. Somehow, that all binds together, creates things that are so just interesting to look at.
Yeah, these iconic gestures and facial expressions that Kyle detailed were most likely influenced by Wayang puppet theater in late 19th and early 20th century exotic and modern dance, among other things. These two specifically, though, played a lot with unnatural human movement and stretching and twisting of the body. Things that Kyle mentioned earlier and that people would commonly associate with Schiele's art and style. He was actually sent to prison for 3 weeks in 1912 over accusations that he seduced and produced pornographic images of a young girl. Over 100 drawings were taken from his studio and deemed appropriate. The judge even made a show out of burning one of his drawings in front of him. Despite that, though, he continued to work and produce art that is celebrated today for its uniqueness and psychological expression.
So yeah, like Trin said, he still continues to impact the modern world today with his psychologically charged artwork and his distortion of the human body. And like Kyle said, his artwork is often considered emotionally and sexually charged. And despite dying of influenza at age 28, at the height of his art career, he still became very famous and became one of the leading figures of Australian expressionism of the 20th century. And he's very well represented in Austria, especially at the Albertina in Vienna. And one of his most famous subportraits, which was done in 1912, was the Chinese lantern plant. It is today featured in the Leopold Museum in Vienna. This artwork noticeably has less distortion, but it's still his aesthetic as it depicts scars on his face and the use of colors. And he was very different and controversial. Even today, some of his artwork still shocks viewers. And he places a lot of emphasis on personal angst and unveiled eroticism. And lots of his works are considered to be bold and defiant by many artists, especially with the emphasis of the contour drawings and the twisting of the line.